It's been quite some time since the release of Sumeru, with which came Collei and the Dendro Traveler, and to this day, there are people confused about which Dendro character is better, and that's because the answer is not that simple. Both Collei and the Dendro Traveler are better at some things than the other, making them stronger for some character teams, but weaker for others. So first I'll be explaining both of their kits, then comparing them generally, and then comparing them for certain characters. First, let's talk about Collei's kit, which works better for quick swap teams with melee characters. So her burst requires only 60 energy and lasts for 9 seconds at level 60, and in that duration can apply Dendro 3 times, which is not a lot compared to the Traveler, but she also has different things to add more Dendro application. Like for example, she has a talent which forms a ring around her which can apply Dendro 1 more time and 2 times if you have C2. Then her skill can apply Dendro 2 times in total, and if you're using the sacrificial bow, you can apply Dendro 2 more times by using her skill once more. Her C6 buffs her skill even more and applies Dendro 1 more time. So if you were to add all these together, she can apply Dendro a total of 6 at C0, 7 at C2, and 8 at C6. And at C4, she gives 60 EM to other characters. Now for the Traveler's kit, I find him generally better for most teams as a Dendro support, but he does have some flaws. His skill is pretty normal and just applies Dendro once, but his burst is what's so great about him. His burst lasts for 15 seconds and applies Dendro 6 times at C2 but has an energy cost of 80. His burst works differently and gains buffs depending on the element applied on it, so if you apply Hydro, the radius increases. If you apply Electro, the attack speed increases, which does not increase the amount of times he can apply Dendro, but does increase his damage. And finally, if you apply Pyro, it explodes, dealing damage, which does mean no more Dendro application. His C6 is actually really good and increases the elemental damage by 12% for the element applied on his burst, and this constellation will be available for everybody to get. He also has another talent which does the same thing that Collei at C4 does, but the EM increases gradually, but with C4 you get 30 EM instantly, and then again you get more EM gradually. Now that we know how they both work, I'm gonna compare them both generally and then specifically for some characters like Nilou, Cyno, Yae Miko, and a few others. So it should be pretty clear that for teams that use Pyro for burning or purging, the Traveler's burst could pose some problems as you have to apply a different element first to his burst, then switch to Pyro, which may not be possible for some teams. So for teams where you literally cannot use DMC, you may want to use Collei. Also, ER may be a problem too, as the Traveler's burst costs 80 energy. You may need a lot of ER to have his burst ready at all times, unlike Collei. But there are a lot of things DMC is better at. First, his Dendro application is better because of the AoE and the duration, but I do like her Sprout talent which follows you around, so even if the enemy does leave your burst, you can still apply some Dendro, which is really good for melee characters. I'd say for ranged characters, you're better off using DMC, but for melee characters, you can consider using Collei instead. And it's the same with Aggravate and Bloom, where I feel like Aggravate, it's fine if you use Collei, but I think it's really important that you use the DMC for Bloom reactions. Now for the constellations, you can get every single constellation for your Traveler, and so the extra ER, EM, and the duration buff plus the damage bonus is all very helpful. For Collei, her C2, C4, and especially C6 does make her stronger, and I'd say that you need at least C2 Collei if you really want to use her, which I don't think is that hard as we already have C1. But yeah, she does get a lot better as you get more constellations. So to sum everything up, Collei's constellations improve her a lot, and so having at least C2 Collei or even more constellations is kinda needed for her. Then Collei's ER situation is better than the DMC and is probably a better battery than the DMC because she creates more particles. Then her burst doesn't last that long and has a very small AoE compared to the Traveler, but she is better for quick swap teams because of the shorter CD. Then Collei is a must-have for certain Pyro teams, and she's more usable with melee characters because of the Sprout ability. And finally for Collei, you need to have her at C4 to provide your characters with EM, unlike the Traveler. Then for the Dendro Traveler, his constellations are available for everybody, and so anybody can C6 him, and they all provide really good buffs. But for the Dendro Traveler, his burst costs 80 energy and can pose some ER problems, and though his burst is costly, it does last longer than Collei's and has a better AoE and better Dendro application. Then the Dendro Traveler is better for ranged characters, and he provides your team with EM from the get-go. And finally, he can use his Sapwood Blade to buff your party members with even more EM. And I think that's about it. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. So you can use this info as you like and make your conclusions and figure out which character is better for your situation. Though I'd say the DMC is better generally, but if you're still confused, I will now be going through some characters and explaining why Collei or the DMC is better for them. First, let's start with Nilou. Nilou is one of those characters where Collei works really well. Her CD and burst duration is almost perfect for Nilou, and you could basically use either Collei or the Dendro Traveler, and there really isn't that big of a difference. Now, yes, you will be missing out the bigger radius from the DMC's burst, but as Nilou is a melee character, the Sprout will follow her and still apply Dendro. And in some cases, it might be better as Collei does apply Dendro more than the DMC, and if everything hits, especially if you give her Sacrificial Bow, it's actually really good. And you can actually use both Collei and the Dendro Traveler together for Nilou to make as many seeds as you can, and it's actually pretty good. I think that's the best way to use Nilou. It's to have both the Dendro Traveler and Collei at the same time in your party. But if I had to pick one, I would pick Collei over the DMC, but the difference between them is not that big. For Cyno, neither Collei nor the Dendro Traveler is amazing for him, as his burst duration is just too long even for the Dendro Traveler, so at the end, you'll just be using Cyno alone with his burst without any Dendro reactions if you play him for his entire burst. I'd say you can use either Collei or the Dendro Traveler, though yes, the Dendro Traveler does provide Dendro application for longer. You may just want to swap out of his burst and switch to other characters, so you don't really need the Dendro for the 15 seconds. And for both Collei and the Dendro Traveler, if the enemies leave their burst, it's just useless. But Collei's Sprout does help you out with this as he is a melee character. You can still apply Dendro from, her ring around her. I'd say if you have Cyno, you really need Nahida to use him to his complete potential. And if I had to pick one, I would choose DMC over Collei just because of the burst duration being longer. Now for someone like Yae Miko, I find the Dendro Traveler way better, especially because Yae Miko is a ranged character and the rotations with Yae Miko take a lot of time, so you really need the Dendro burst to stay up longer and keep applying Dendro. And so that's why the Dendro Traveler is better for Yae Miko. For Childe, I think it really depends on the characters you use with Childe. If the other character is a sub DPS that uses the Dendro reactions, like for example having Yae Miko, then the Dendro Traveler is way better. But if your team just uses Childe, then Collei isn't a bad option, as you probably will have to switch out of Childe close to when Collei's burst runs out due to the way his skill works. So if I had to pick one, I'd pick the Dendro Traveler, but if you really had to, it's fine if you use Collei too. And for other characters like 4 stars or just characters with normal skill CDs and bursts, the Dendro Traveler is better. Like for Kokomi or Fischl, Keqing, I would just use the Dendro Traveler instead of Collei. And that's about it for this video. If you have any more questions about, other characters that I didn't mention, do let me know in the comments down below. I will answer them whenever I have time. But yeah, that's all. I hope you guys enjoyed and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!